I should probably be able to speak more Romanian because it's already my third time in the country, but I appreciate your flexibility that I can do this in English. The first time I came to DrobetaTurnuSeverin, I arrived by bicycle. This time, as she said, I came by hitchhiking or autostop. And this is how I have spent most of my time in the past 2 years, traveling in periods of up to 5 months at a time, either overland, either by bicycle or hitchhiking. Today I want to share with you a bit about why I started doing this, a little bit of how I have come to approach the process, and some of the lessons I have learned which feed right back into why I continue to do this, even if it's to come attend an event and then go back home. Just so you are not left completely wondering how this all happened, I grew up in Brazil, and sometime in the middle of high school, I fell deeply in love with mathematics. And this was first inspired by an instructor, but it was fed by the books that I was reading, telling the history of the discipline. And I decided that I wanted to be part of that history. So I went to study mathematics. At the same time, I've also had this desire to see more of the world and to travel, to live abroad. Sometime in the middle of college, I found out that it was a possibility for me to go get a PhD in the United States. And this seemed to me like a great opportunity to combine these two driving forces in my life. So I went after that opportunity. And in 2014, I had just gotten my PhD in mathematics and was working my first academic job as a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Mathematical Sciences at the University of Copenhagen. And this is basically where this story really starts. I was using my bicycle there a lot to get from A to B, but also I was riding my bicycle recreationally, and my weekend rides got longer and longer. Then they became overnight rides. Then they became multi-day rides. I was using all my vacation time and weekends to go cycle touring in Scandinavia and Northern Europe. Towards the end of, basically when my appointment, it was a 2-year appointment in Copenhagen, when it ended, I was facing a little bit of a dilemma, because the future I had dreamed of and worked so hard, the path to that future was laid out before me. I basically just had to walk it. I essentially had an offer for another postdoc, and if I had taken that offer, followed the script, met the underlying expectations, I would be now probably in the beginning of a pretty decent career in academia, just another few years from a permanent position. But for the very first time in my life, I was not convinced at all. And mostly I was a bit disappointed. I was feeling like I was becoming gradually the best qualified person to work on an ever smaller class of problems. And this was a bit the opposite of what I was expecting when I went to study mathematics. Math to me is the scaffold of reality, and I wanted to work on solving that mystery, or at least making progress towards solving that mystery. So at least before I committed to that path in academia, I decided that I had to try something different. And because of the circumstances, what made the most sense was for me to ride my bicycle from Copenhagen to Istanbul. And at first, it was something that felt very intimidating. But just 2 or 3 weeks into the process, I had never in my entire life felt so alive and so present and so motivated to do what I was doing. And one way to describe this is that, as I said, 2-3 weeks into the process, my memories of my time in Copenhagen felt like distant memories from childhood. My memories from my time in the US felt like memories from a movie I might have watched a long time ago. And if you ask me about my memories from even before that, it might be a movie that I haven't even watched. Maybe I just saw the trailer or heard about it from somebody. So this is how much in the moment I was. And even this hypothetical destination of Istanbul became less and less like a goal for me to reach, but more and more just a guide to a guide for the 80 kilometers or so I was supposed to ride that day. I was really taking it one day at a time. And I was so energized by all of this when I arrived in Istanbul that I decided I had to do that again. So instead of resuming my career in academia, I took some time off the road just to prepare for another adventure, and eventually left for another 5 months on the road by bicycle around Eastern Europe and a little bit of Scandinavia as well. During that trip, I fell in love in Lviv, and so since then I have spent another 4 months traveling with my partner, hitchhiking or autostop across Europe and around Brazil. And this and a series of other projects is how I've been basically living my life for the past couple of years, and intend to continue at least for the time being. I call the way I do this self-supported surrender, and I will explain a little bit what that means because it might seem like a bit of a contradiction. I try to carry everything I need with me. I have a tent, a sleeping bag, a pad. I carry cooking equipment. When I was cycle touring last summer, I even had a folding chair to relax at the end of the day. And so I basically try to anticipate some of what my needs will be, and I'm usually prepared for about 95% of what I meet on the road. But I also surrender to the road. This is not an extended vacation or anything like that. It's really a lifestyle. My path is guided by my encounters on the road. I rely very heavily on people's hospitality and guidance when I'm on the road, especially when I am hitchhiking. I rely completely on their generosity to give me a ride further along my path. And so one of the questions I get the most about this, especially when I am traveling alone, is whether I'm not afraid of doing this. And it's funny because usually I think when people ask me if I'm afraid, they have something specific in mind. If I'm not afraid of people, or if I'm not afraid of traffic, or if I'm not afraid of not being able to find a job back in society. And so the answer is that I'm probably even more afraid than people might anticipate, because it's all of that combined. And I was actually very afraid of coming to Romania for the first time. I had a few prejudices about the country. I didn't know the country. And I was so afraid of coming here that when I did my ride from Copenhagen to Istanbul, I went through Serbia, not to go through Romania. And so, of course, after my experience on that ride, I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I need to go to Romania. And so Romania was the first country, well, technically the second, but it's like the first country I crossed into in my next cycle touring project. And I was still very apprehensive about coming here, but I came anyways. I didn't know where I was going to spend the night when in my first night in the country. But This lack of options, actually, as I started riding along the Danube River towards DrobetaTurnuSeverin, actually, and talking to people, my options were nearly overwhelming, from pitching a tent with the truck drivers at the rest stop a few kilometers before town to the backyard of Lucien, who not only allowed me to do that, but offered me the most delicious dinner his wife had cooked, and also shared one of the most soothing conversations I've ever had on the road. Continue for another 3 weeks in Romania. Hospitality remained the norm, and even the slightest discomfort was really the exception. And the spirit of what I had experienced in my previous project was still present here and remained present further along the road in other countries I have visited. This is not to say that I never have any bad experiences. It's more to say that, one, they are overwhelmingly trumped by the good experiences. Wherever and whenever I need help, I can always find somebody who is not just available to help me, but they seem excited and happy to help me. And whether this is some practical concern, or if I am even feeling emotional at times, there is always something out there for me. And I'm also happy because I often get the feeling that I was also able to offer many of those people what they were needing from me at that moment. So it's a really nice exchange. Having said all of that, it is also often implied that I get to do this, especially if I'm doing this alone, because I'm a guy. And so what I can say, of course, I have never experienced doing any of this as a woman, so I cannot speak for what their experience might be. But what I can tell you is that there's plenty of women doing this. One more. This is Eva. And she has been cycle touring and organizing her life around cycle touring for the past 5 years. This photo is from her arrival in the northernmost part of Japan just 5 years ago. I met her in Lviv when she was coming back to Poland from 2 years on the road in Central Asia and the Middle East. You can read more about her experience, and you can find other women doing this on the internet as well. It has not all been just flowers, but she told me she could never think of herself going back to her career in upper management, and she's going back to Poland just to get ready to go back on the road again. There are also people traveling with baby. Yeah, okay, unfortunately you cannot see their photo, but I strongly recommend you go to their website. This is a Ukrainian band, Folkneri, Yarina, and Vova, have been cycle touring. This is also part of their lifestyle. They travel not just to share their music, but also to do research in local musical traditions that they then incorporate into their music. They had a baby on the road, and the baby just became part of the team. I had lunch with them once, and I asked her if it isn't troublesome to travel with a baby, and she said that although she can't say it's easy, she says that it's easier than being at home with a baby. So that's another example. One other point I would like to touch on is that people will often imagine that if you're going to be traveling for 5 months or for even less time than that, it should be very expensive. And I actually thought that as well until I met Bogdan. He came to give a presentation in Copenhagen when I was living there, and when I found out that this guy was traveling around Europe for less than €1 a day, I decided that it was, so that was like the last barrier for me to really just say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'll figure it out. He's a very inspiring character, and especially because he's also from Romania, I encourage you to look him up as well. While we're talking about the money aspect of this, I will tell you one more insight I've had. This is one of my many campsites by one of many of Sweden's amazing lakes. There you can camp just about anywhere as long as people don't see you legally. And this particular campsite took me 2 to 3 hours to find, and it got me thinking about whether this was really worth it. At the time I was still working, so I was thinking, why don't I just pay for a hotel or for a campsite or something? And would it be worth doing this every day or almost every day for an extended period of time? And so 2 to 3 hours a day. Then I realized that the rental I was paying for a room in was about 1/3 of my salary. And if you take into account that I'm working 7 to 8 hours a day, that means that I'm still working 2 to 3 hours a day for a place to live, for a place to sleep at night. So the bottom line here is I don't want to sell this to you as a success story. I haven't left academia and then built $1 million business or solved the refugee crisis or whatever. What I'm sharing with you is just a possibility. It is something that I didn't know was possible, but once I started doing it and turned out to, oops, okay. Is everything okay? Okay, so back to where I was. I just want to share with you that this is a possibility. And whatever you are at home or on the road, you're still going to have to do the dishes, both literally and metaphorically. And I want to challenge you to think up, to question your basic assumptions about what comforts and what are your basic needs and what this really is. And once you have those met, you will realize that you will have a lot of energy and time to work on whatever else you consider important. So thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of this amazing day. Thank you.